like 6 or 7 that I have here just hanging around, that I finished for him, and then.
Dude, let me tell you what, that site like blew up, man. Like, I wake up this morning, it had over 500 likes. I'm like, I told you it was though, but like, Jesus,
S-
You know,
So Phil,
you never
that's
know.
yours.
that's my buddies. That's from
Okay,
Canning.
got it, got it, got
Soon
it.
to be ex-buddies. I think Phil's gonna claim it. Phil's
Oh,
gonna be like,
dude.
"Man, I
Well,
lost it, bro."
Hey, what's up, everybody? Sketch Guide here. Welcome back to Fandamn Collectibles, the YouTube channel of choice when it comes to original art. And I have an amazing artist with us today and a familiar guest who knows the deal when it comes to commissioning work and getting the best out of your favorite artists that are out there. So we want to welcome Jose the Beast Varese, straight out of South Florida. What's up, Jose?
Hey, what's up? Hi, SG. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Yeah, and I'm here with Phil, Phil the Thrill. So this is gonna be fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
It's definitely going to be a lot of fun, and I mixed up fun and Phil because they go together, especially when it comes to this game. Phil, what's up? How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, man? I'm just glad to be back on the show, and I'm glad to bring the guest on, man. This is a guy I've been knowing for quite a while, and I'm glad we got him on the show.
Absolutely. This has been a couple of months in the making, and I think it's going to be a good one. But before we get into the work, I know what you folks out there want to see. We definitely have to pay respect to our boy Jose and give him a minute to let us know a little bit about who he is and his journey. So, Jose, you want to talk a little bit about really your beginnings as a comic artist, and how did sketch covers in particular really stick for you, end up being the thing that I think you're most known for and celebrated for?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, to sum things up, I actually have an art background in commercial art, which is kind of like the direction that I was going into since I was in high school. To like kind of work for an ad agency. The type of madman type of environment where you're working for all the big name brands and doing advertising and stuff like that. And that's what I was groomed for. But that industry took like a crazy turn in the towards the late '90s, and things weren't the same. So I had to kind of like figure out what I was going to do. So at first I started doing a lot of freelance work for small mom and pop agencies that just needed like you know graphic
Quick
design,
logo
illustration,
or
logos, stuff like that.
got it.
Nothing comic book related. And at that time, you didn't have social media, so it was, if you wanted to submit something to a publisher, you had to go through like snail mail and hope that your work wasn't thrown in the trash with like 50 or 60 or 100 other submissions. We already know the stories where like Todd McFarlane says, hey, I've had to submit my work 100 times and I got 100 rejection letters. So that was kind of the way things were for a while, just me doing stuff like that. And so I kind of like went into a totally different career path that had nothing to do with art, but I still was doing art on the side just for my own personal joy. And it wasn't until like about 2005, 2006 that I started to like want to get back into art. And I kind of got into the blogs and things like that, and I hooked up with other like-minded artists that wanted to build something like a publishing company. And that's where I started with my first group of people, and they were called Creature Entertainment. And we started working. We were all very ambitious about what we wanted. We wanted to do films, we wanted to do animatics, we wanted to do comics. And one of the first comics that I actually drew from soup to nuts, covered in the whole nine yards, was called The Gun. That was my first major comic that I did. And it was just basically a one one-off standalone comic from beginning to end. And that was kind of like what got me back into the energy of doing comics. Little by little, we started doing other titles and things like that. And as I started to get into that world, we started to do more conventions, local conventions here in Miami. Then we went to Orlando for MegaCon, and then you know sometimes we would get into like Heroes Con in North Carolina, and so on and so forth until and New York Comic Con. And it was in those conventions that I got to meet a lot of people that were into this kind of stuff, like sketch covers. I didn't even know what a sketch cover was at that time. And then people were like, "Hey, can you do this?" Or I saw you do this. Can you do that? And I started to do one or two sketch covers for a few people, and I guess they posted it on, I guess, your community of sketch cover collectors, and then they started hitting me up and saying, "Hey, I saw that you did this. Can you do something like that for me?" And then I started working in those kind of avenues and building my clientele slowly over many years. And in 2014, I quit my day job. I was working as a logistic uh, analyst. Like, I know, totally different from anything that has to do with art. Mostly transportation and imports and stuff like that, and exporting stuff. And I left that in 2014, and I went all in to like trying to build my brand, build a business, and start getting clients to do a lot of to do the art thing full time. And at the time, I had my kids. They were very young, and I wanted to be more at home to be able to provide support to my wife, and at the same time, like, really, like, connect with my children, because sometimes we don't have that opportunity. And I use that as an opportunity for me to be more in my children's lives, and kind of like in their development. So that's what gave me the option of like working from home and adjusting my hours accordingly. And then from then on, it just became a slow process. You're building clients, going to shows, doing one sketch cover. Then from one sketch cover, it was, hey, can you do a cover for a publication? And okay, that was great. Can you do another one? And then I started to align myself with other independent publishers that were doing very well at the time, like Dan Mendoza from like the Zombie Tramp series and the Still
Yep.
Ill Princess. And then I started to connect with like Brian Polito and the
Coffin Comics.
Coffin Comics and all that. So, at the same time, working with other independents like who were not as big, but they still had a presence, like Pharaoh's Lounge, and all those, which were a little more on the risque side. But since I never really had a problem with that because I came from a classical drawing background, so we had nude figures.
Live
We
models,
had,
right? Yeah.
like, that kind of stuff didn't really bother me. So it was like, okay, it's a job. It allows me to put money on, in the bank, feed my family, and be there for my children. So that's what I did. And um, right around, I think, like, things were going, steady, and it was around the time of the pandemic in 2020 that I decided that I wanted to do a lot of my own self-publishing and create my own content rather than work for other people and creating stuff to kind of like push their stuff forward. I still wanted to do that, but I really wanted to like have my own say as to what I wanted to put out there. So in 2020, I took the opportunity. I got like a part-time job working doing data entry, and then at nighttime I would just, you know, to kind of like get rid of having to work for so many clients. I pigeonholed myself into just doing a regular 9 to 5 job, and then at nighttime I would work on my first art book. And then I used Kickstarter to do the to promote the book on that platform, and it did very well. And then from then on, it was like, okay, here's a chunk of money that I didn't expect to have. What do I do with it? Do I go on a trip? Do I do this? Do I do that? No. let me look at this as an investment. Take that money after we pay off the printer and pay off everybody and get the product out to the customers. Whatever's left over, if it can buy me another month or 2 months or even 3 months where I can pay my bills and focus on building more IPs, then let me do that. And that's how I started to do, one Kickstarter after another, after another, after another, and coming up with different things. And then eventually that led to my creator-owned project called Santera, which that um, that was my first like kind of dipping my toe back into doing comics again from soup to nuts. Where before I was just doing like I went from doing interiors or sequentials to just doing covers and sketch covers. So this was me kind of like trying to tell a story the way I wanted it told. And from there it just kind of like kept going and going and going. And I was very fortunate because I was able to align myself with a lot of like-minded individuals that shared the same kind of like passion and also understood the business side of art.
Right.
Because as an artist, it's you're juggling so many balls up in the air. You're juggling, you have to do the art, then you have to be on social media posting, then you have to make sure you reach out to the clients and take their requests or answer their questions. um you know Invoicing, shipping stuff out,
I do
all
want
that
to
stuff.
say, Jose, because it's funny. I've had some like really quick videos, like minute, 2 minute long videos, where I talked a bit about some recent issues with artist management groups and
Hmm.
comics.
Yeah.
And overwhelmingly people understood where I was coming from, just trying to be informative, give people a sense of what was happening. But there were some folks who were like, oh, he's anti artist management groups, which is not the case. Um, they obviously have a purpose because of what you're talking
Mm.
about. It is very difficult to be able to compartmentalize in that way,
Yeah.
where you can focus on the artwork and then also essentially run your own business, which is what you're describing here.
Yes.
And not everybody is necessarily up to do that. Some people know that that's beyond the scope for them. That doesn't really kind of work in terms of their skill set. So it makes sense to bring somebody else in to manage you and to, basically take control over some of those aspects of the day-to-day business behind the art.
Yes.
But like for you, that's something, especially with your other experience. I mean, if you're dealing with shipping and data entry, and I mean, a lot of the normal corporate expectations, in terms of data entry and keeping books, so to speak. That stuff that seems like it was already in your wheelhouse and helped you as you kind of ventured into self-publishing.
Yes. And I think to talk about a couple of your points with regards to people dealing with management companies or agents per se. I think it all depends on the having finding the right person to represent you, and at the same time understand that it's not that you're not just a cash cow to them, but you're actually something that they could pour their energy into to not only build your brand but also make, as you become successful they become successful.
Right.
I partnered up with a gentleman by the name of Andy Rivera, and he is the owner of the Lab Comics,
Right.
and he's also a great friend. And he had almost like I would say if I had a brother that maybe was like kind of like we were separated at birth, he would have been that guy because when we talk, we have the same kind of business goals, the same kind of like ambition. We want to elevate the business as we go and make it better and better and better. And I think a lot of times what happens is that artists are not fortunate enough to connect with the right people, and they fall prey or victim to certain people that are just basically using them for their talent. They don't really want them to to grow, because if they grow, then they have this fear that somehow these people are going to leave them. So they want to pigeonhole them into a certain box or keep them there so that they're always codependent on that agent or that management company for jobs, for commissions, for this, that, and the other, and never really grow outside of that. So that's where you hear your horror stories. But I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have an agent. I never per se had like I other than Anthony, like for a while, like basically repping me and stuff. But Anthony was a different, it's a whole different animal,
Right.
like um he was also a good source. Like he gave me a lot of information that that I appreciate to this day. So it's always I think in this industry it's always about connecting with the right people that you feel really have your best interests at heart and that want to grow with you, um and watch you kind of like reach your potential. So that's the hard part of this industry. And like you said, being an artist, you juggle a lot of different balls, and not a lot of artists are, they could be very talented,
Right.
but maybe they don't have the organizational skills to be able to like say, okay, let me set up my commissions like this so that I'm not too far behind, or that I don't, or they don't know how to communicate, so there's like a gap in the communication between the client and the artist, and then that creates friction.
Right.
So it these are skills that I learned in like real world job corporate environment. You have your deadlines, you have your responsibilities, you have to be accountable. If you make a mistake, you have to own up to it and you have to provide a solution.
Right.
And at the beginning of my career, I made my mistakes too. I had, I took on too much work. I put myself into a hole. I was late in getting stuff to people. I'm not going to say that I'm the perfect artist. I
Oh,
went through all of that, all of that. And so I'm not here to preach or anything like that. I'm here to actually say I was part of the problem. Part of the problem was me, my inability to really understand the scope of things. And sometimes it has to do with like maybe you're undercharging a little bit. So you're taking on more work
right.
to pay your bills, but you can't dig yourself out of that hole because now you're going to a convention and now you have work at home, you're going to a convention,
Taking on
you're
more work.
you're taking a lot more work and you're trying to do as much as you can at the show, but then you're taking stuff from the show back home and you're adding on to your pile. And sooner or later it becomes a situation where you're basically putting out fires. Whoever's screaming at you that they want their commission or their money back, and that they're very upset, and then you have to kind of like say, okay, let me take some stock and say I was wrong. I made this mistake, and be honest. The worst thing you can do as an artist, and I'm hoping that this reaches a lot of artists and in the most humble of ways, is to keep the communication line open with your clients, with the people that your fans that are spending their hard-earned money. These guys are not, they don't have like two, three, $400 just hanging around.
Right.
They have, they're working hard for that money and they're investing it in you. The least you can do is answer an email back or a text. If there's a situation when you can't answer right away, that's fine. You can always answer and say, okay, I'm sorry, I made I was really busy or I was sick or whatnot, but this is what's going on and this is what I want to keep you abreast of. If you can do that and keep the communication line going, I think that's better than if you ghost somebody because
Oh, of
you're
course.
afraid of, you're afraid
Absolutely.
of them yelling at you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it.
And I have to say too, I think you're being a little hard on yourself when you're like, "Oh, I'm not perfect," or "I've made mistakes." A lot of that is just what goes on anyhow you enter a new field or a new aspect of a field. So yes, you knew you were trying to venture into comics, but the sketch cover work and then Kickstarter, everything that you do for the first time, there's going to be that learning curve.
Hmm.
And then you have to make adjustments. And it's how you make those adjustments that determine whether or not you're viewed as, okay, like this is someone who is worth investing in, or if this is somebody who's problematic. And
Yes.
so, I think any artist has that period where they have to really think about pricing because, like you said, you undercharge, you're basically asking to be thrown in the hole when it comes to the amount of work that comes your way. When it comes to just, rapport with your clients, some people, unfortunately, a few situations have to go sideways for them to realize, like, you know what, let me be very upfront what the timeline is, how often you'll hear from me, things of that nature. But until you're in it, until you're in those situations, it's hard to really know exactly how they're going to play out because there's not a formal mentoring system when it comes to comic art, right?
No,
You
I
know,
wish there was. I
I,
wish there was. But
I think it would help a lot of people, but it's not reality. It's not a thing where like an artist automatically reaches out to you because they see a cover or something that you have, and they try to give you insight into all of these other aspects of being a working comic artist. So yeah, it's going to be trial and error for most people. But I think that if you talk to folks who love commissions, your name pops up again and again and again as a guy who is great to work with, who they feel like they're always aware of what's happening.
appreciate
And
that.
normally, if you're dealing with people of equal talent, that's the difference maker. Like when you feel like I can depend on this guy getting it to me in this amount of time, or if there's an issue, he's going to be upfront. All of those things, they're not automatically, just kind of bestowed onto an artist, like an understanding of it, but it's how quickly you figure it out. And, a lot of that goes back to being a professional, which is another word that comes up all the time when you talk to collectors about Jose Varese.
I
So
appreciate that.
you do deserve a lot of credit, even though there have been bumps in the road. But like I said, there's no mentoring. There's there's no like official
Oh
guidance
God, I wish there
in
was.
terms. Yeah, so like you folks have to understand that. But I think you figured it out and you've done right by the people who commission you.
Thank
Um, Let me ask a couple of questions, just kind of backtracking because you
you.
told us so much that I think really will give people a lot more insight into who you are and your journey. But a couple of things I want to touch on. Creature Entertainment.
Hmm.
So I do remember the gun. I think you had a couple of different versions of that
Ravenous.
cover.
I did the gun, and I think I did the gun, and I did a few covers for. They had another title called TS 101, Test Subject 101. I did Ravenous, which is the second comic book that I did for them. And that kind of was like our breakout where we actually got onto Diamond
Yeah,
and were with distributed through Diamond to the stores. So that was great. Zombie Years was another one that was created by another artist, fellow artist, name is Juan Navarro, and John Ulloa was the writer, and he was kind of like the one that kind of put us all together.
right.
And just really quick, he was actually a very successful indie comic book owner back in the early '90s when the indies were exploding before the whole comic book thing just kind of collapsed on itself. The whole speculation thing.
The spec bubble burst. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So he was doing very well. He was worked on with a company called High Impact Comics in Miami, which was the first independent like comic book company in Miami that actually like kind of like pushed out and had a little bit of like traction. So he was again. I'm fortunate that even though there isn't a mentoring system, that I fell in the path of people that had experience in all these aspects of the comic book industry, from being a publisher, from being a writer, from being an artist, and they were able to share that knowledge with me as we collaborated on projects, like you said, like the gun and all that. So yeah, that was a really that was kind of like the beginning of how things started to kind of the dots started to connect for me as to how the business worked.
And I have to say, when it comes to the work that Creature was doing, I want to give a shout out to Mighty Mel V. It's Drunken Chat Son, because really his coverage of Creature Entertainment Comics, he used to have like a little regular column where he went over indie comics.
Hmm.
And that was really the first place I remember seeing your work, and him talking about like how that stuff was cool and it was something that needed to be on any collector's radar. And when it comes to the artists that ended up being put in the spotlight due to Creature's efforts, you obviously are somebody who is a standout. And then, of course, Jeff Decal
Yep.
is another artist that came through Creature, had an early TS 101 cover.
Hmm.
Uh, the Gun has covers. And he has a killer unpublished Ravenous cover. I know that, like, I think he has it on his website, but it's one of those things that's not hard to find through a Google search.
Hmm.
But, between you and him, that stuff immediately made me say, like, if I come across any of these Creature books, I'm scooping them up. So, that stuff was really influential. And I think is worth noting for the folks who weren't aware of, just how much of an impact a relatively small publisher ended up having, producing or at least giving spotlight to two significant artists, yourself and Jeff Decal. The other thing with Sudden Impact, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he take credit for publishing the first sketch cover ever, the first blank before
Yes, yes, yes.
before the
John.
Gen 13 one? So
No, 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 no. John once boasted to me. He showed me. He showed me, and I think I still have it somewhere. And it's funny that you mentioned that because now I'm gonna have to go through digging through all my stuff to find it. And if I do, I'll definitely
let me know.
I'll
I've
bring it on the
never come
show.
across one, and I've never seen it on eBay. But as
Mm,
far as I'm aware, Sudden Impact published the first blank sketch
yeah.
cover. I want to say in like 91 or 92, something like that.
Yes. It was actually, but it was a sketch cover that you couldn't draw on because the cover itself
The
was
paper
made out of
quality.
like a leather material or a leatherette or some kind of a pleatherish kind of material. So it's like unless you had Sharpies, that's pretty much all you could do to it. But
Because it's funny, I've never seen an actual like image done on it. I've seen the blank, like you can find that through like a thorough Google search, but
mhm,
I've never seen art on it. And I kind of suspected what you're telling me, that like the paper quality just wasn't hitting
there was no
and
paper
nobody.
quality. There was no paper. It was this kind of like like the thing about high impact comics at the time and the sudden impact was the title of
Sorry, okay, High
their
Impact Comics, my bad.
yeah.
And Sudden
Sun
Impact.
Impact was the actual title of the two girls that were like the main characters in the book. They were kind of like special ops girls, kind of the whole sexy Miami vibe with like guns and you know um
Miami Vice meets
the Miami
Scarface, kind
Vice,
of.
the
Yeah.
old those B movies. Remember those crazy B movies that had like really good looking like Playboy girls and stuff like that, and they were all like on these crazy missions to like, and it was like really like the
HBO
production
after
quality.
11 p.m. Showtime after 1. Absolutely.
Yeah,
It may have Billy Blanks in it, Cynthia
exactly.
Rothrock.
But it was great. I mean, that was the 90s Miami at the time, and so he wanted to kind of do this decadent cover of like this leather kind of material with but I think he didn't think it through as far as like, oh, this is something that you could actually do like maybe a remark or something with
Right.
a marker, but he didn't think it through in the sense of if I do this with a paper cover, maybe we can do. And then obviously, he came up with the idea of sketch covers without really understanding the potential of sketch covers. He's kind of like the unofficial grandfather of sketch covers.
Right. Right. That's
And
definitely the best way to look at it.
So that's kind of like, and we always have a story about that because it always cracks me up when he tells me, I'm like, you did a sketch cover, you did the first sketch cover, and you couldn't sketch on it. Like, what was wrong with you at the time? So it
Because to
was
me,
not
that would
fun.
be significant. Like if you actually could find somebody who did artwork
Hmm.
on that blank. I mean, like again, that would be the beginnings of sketch covers, but I've never seen artwork on one of them. I've only seen
No,
images of the blank itself. But like you said, he had something going. It got us on the path we're on now. So I'm
yeah.
thankful for that. But the practicality of the actual sketching wasn't there because the paper quality was
Well, now you got me inspired. So if I do find that cover, I might actually do a
Uh-oh.
remark
I
because the technology has caught up with the demand as far as now you can use like Posca, those Posca
I
markers which are
yes.
acrylic and they go on anything. So that might be that
Jose, I think
you
you would
might
make
just inspire
history.
me to do something crazy now.
You would be making history with it. As far as I know, I mean, somebody out there, on the web, on social media, may have something that's in the basement, in the attic, where they got an artist to draw on that sketch cover. I'm just saying, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either, and now you got me on a quest. Now I'm gonna be digging through all kinds of stuff just to see if I could find that cover,
Jose
and if I do,
Varese, everybody, he's ready to make history.
yeah, let's see. And if I do, I'll bring it to this show. We're
I
gonna do it on this
appreciate it.
show, and we're gonna post it, and we're gonna, I'll
Oh,
even
yeah.
see if I can get John on board and have him come over too.
It would definitely be the right mix of people. Jose Varese, John, showing everybody the first blank actually being done justice by Jose the Beast Varese. So listen, stay tuned, everybody. Hopefully we can make it happen.
Yeah,
But if you even just find that thing, man, that would be awesome. Because like I said, I haven't seen it in person, only via my research. But if you even held up one right now, like that would be a big moment. So if you
that would
find
be
it,
really
let me
cool.
know, man. Thank you for checking out the Fandamn Collectibles YouTube channel. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and stay tuned because we'll be back before you know it.